Joining me in the Photography Show studio, I have Jill Furmanovsky, hot off the superstage here. Thank you very much for joining us. You were talking about your rock and roll career in the stage now. Just give us a flavour as to what your talk covered.
Well, it sort of covers from being a little music fan at the age of 14 and taking my first rock picture of Paul McCartney and two school friends and an elbow with a Kodak Instamatic outside Abbey Road, to going into Abbey Road and photographing Pink Floyd recording Wish You Were Here and Oasis recording one or two of their albums as well. So, and it came right up to date to last week.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it a kind of working photographer's autobiography, if you like.
What was the most recent bit of work from last week?
Last week it was a band called Stornoway who've just had their farewell tour.
Right.
They're a young band who did sort of quite well and whose music I really loved, and I did their first shoot. And also Catfish and the Bottlemen.
Okay.
So they were my current bands that I was working with, and my last shot was Stornoway at their last London show before they disbanded, even though they're quite young.
Yeah. I've just come back from a week in Stornoway in the
Have
Western Isles.
you?
What a beautiful place it is.
What a beautiful place. Well, when I photographed Stornoway the first time, they hadn't been there at all.
Oh, so they're not from Stornoway?
No, they're from Oxford, and their lead singer's an ornithologist, so he's very interested in Stornoway for the birds, you see. There we are.
Lots of birds, lots of midges, as I remember in the Western Isles too.
Yes.
So a lot of your work is very closely associated with the music industry for obvious reasons, but I'm curious about what your relationship with music is. Do you play? Would you like to play? Are you a music fan?
Well, I can only say yes to the latter. I've never had any skill or even a desire to play anything. Mm-hmm. And in fact, only a year or two ago, somebody showed me how to hold an electric guitar. I was like, where'd you put your hands? What do you have to press that? And honestly,
all those years spent photographing guitarists of the highest caliber.
Exactly. To me, they're sort of magical beings, and that's how I like it to be. I'm not knowledgeable about music. I don't have a huge record collection. Mm-hmm. I just love musicians. I think they're, I love what they do. I've worked with so many of the greatest ones.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I'm in love with musicians and music, but I'm not a buff in any way.
Sure. When you started out, you talk about hanging out outside Abbey Road waiting for musicians to come out and take pictures.
Well, the Beatles, really.
Oh, the Beatles in particular, yes. Would you say that the start of your career as a professional was outstanding sheer talent that shone through, or dogged persistence and being in the right place all of the time to get the shots?
Absolutely the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Dogged persistence, being in the right place at the right time. A kind of, to be fair, also a kind of a little bit of magic, because I think I became professional because after a week of training, I was at the Rainbow Theatre for a gig, practicing with a college camera, and two photographers that were professional that worked there said to me, "Are you professional?" And I just said yes.
Yeah.
Of course I wasn't. I'd only done a 1 week course, or less than that, 5 days. But I think I knew that that's what I had to do from the very first roll of film, which was 5 days earlier.
Fake it till you make it, as they say. So for photographers starting out today, perhaps those who are looking to make some waves in the music industry, what would your advice be?
Well, my advice, a couple of people asked me that today, and I said, just remember there is no industry anymore. If you remember that, then you'll be all right, because there are still record companies, and there'll always be talented artists playing music. I'm calling it that, but my suggestion of a more interesting way to look at it is that the 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right up to say 2005 or something, we were in what could be loosely called the rock and roll era, which was the analog era, technically, for film as well, film and photography. Recordings were analog, and then the end of the 90s, we turned into the digital era, and that merged everything, which was marvelous, of course. but it changed everything. And so therefore I think the industry as it was doesn't exist. Therefore, anybody starting out now trying to be a music photographer wouldn't earn a living because the industry doesn't exist. Which doesn't mean to say that you couldn't earn money from taking rock pictures, or that the bands themselves wouldn't be hugely successful, but we're in another era now. And the wisest bit of information is to follow your heart and your passions and so on, and try to make a living from that. But don't try to go backwards, because we cannot.
You talk about how the music industry has changed. We've gone from analog to digital.
Yes.
I guess the same can be said about the photography and the imaging industry as well.
Well,
that's changed immeasurably since the dawn of digital 20 odd years ago.
Precisely. Precisely. That's why I like to think of it as another era. I mean, I know people who do impressionist paintings, but I wouldn't say we're in the impressionist era now. We're out of the rock and roll era, which included the analog recordings and so on as well, and we're in the digital era. I just prefer to think of it that way. We may be moving into another era in a couple of years' time, which we don't know what it might be technologically. It's not to do with lack of brilliance or creativity. It's just that you have to use what you've got and reflect it in the now, not looking backwards. Even I try to do that. I mean, my more current work does use big tableaus that are digitally created. Okay. I embraced it as best I could.
So you've evolved your work as the industry has changed?
I certainly tried. I feel a bit left behind on the social media side. I don't do Facebook or Twitter or Instagram because I can't be bothered with it, I suppose. But so I will be left behind because I'm quite old. But my job is now to package up that era, because most of it hasn't been seen, and I need to sort of organise it. And Rock Archive, the company I began in 1998, is an attempt to bring those elements together so that there is a repository or an archive of archives that people can learn about this stuff from, while I carry on doing a look at my own archive, which is largely unseen by me.
Anyone who's watching who wants to find out more about Rock Archive, because it sounds like an incredible project, and like you say, a really a great way of packaging this era that has we've moved on from now. How do people find out more about it?
Just go to rockarchive.com, and I've done my best to keep that going. It's its 20th anniversary next year, in the hope that someday somebody will start a rock and roll centre, museum, whatever it might be, that we can put this material into.
Right.
Because photography is probably the most evocative way to take it in. The sound, obviously, but that's a no-brainer. Obviously, there's the music, but the other most important thing is how it looked and how it felt, and that's where photography is so evocative. Never mind the guitar and the amp and the toys for boys for pressing buttons. Let's have a place where you could study that and be inspired by it, because it hasn't been done yet.
And it surprises me that it hasn't.
And it hasn't.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck with
Thank you.
bringing together all these bodies of work, and yeah, me too. I hope that there is a physical place to represent all of this history when it comes to music photography.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Jill Furmanovsky, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.